Shall we try again? Afternoon. I just really appreciate you coming out. I get it. It's June. My family's sick. If you keep my family and the Baileys in your prayer as well, they're sick as well. I mean, you could name half a dozen families in our church that are dealing with something. But we really appreciate your prayers this week. But we're really glad that you've come. And this afternoon we're working through, continue to work through a series called Ordinary People and Extraordinary God. Just again, the heart of this series, we often in the church elevate people in unhealthy and unhelpful ways. Both characters from the Bible and people around us even now. I trust that you wouldn't elevate me too much. I'll make enough mistakes in front of you, hopefully, to solve that problem. But if not, you can come and ask me, and I'll tell you the mistakes that I've made this week. But we as we do this, though, and what we're trying to identify is, as we do this, we begin to believe that these people around us, in some way, or these characters in the Bible, are super spiritual or super religious, or they found like the super secret formula, and because of that, now God can use them. And so then we read these stories in the Bible and we're like, right, they must have been just the most incredible people. And in some cases they did incredible things, but actually most of the people that we're going to deal with in the Bible are actually fairly ordinary characters, or at least they do more ordinary things than we think. The second thing we do as we elevate people is we begin to cover up their flaws, especially when we see how God is using them. And we start going, oh yes, I know they do that thing wrong, but their ministry is flourishing, or that thing is it's going gangbusters, it's amazing. And so God must not really care about that flaw, because he's really blessing their ministry. And that is at the root, the cause of so much pain and suffering in our churches, as we find out what leaders have been up to, and it all gets revealed and it all falls apart because people knew about it in the background and they just went, yeah, but people are getting saved. And that's not how the Bible tells us to deal with these things. And the third thing we do is we start believing that we can't be like these people. Or maybe the truth underneath it that we believe is that God can't use me. God can't use me. And so that's where we start this afternoon. And we're going to begin a two-parter. On what I think is one of the most flawed and gifted and most mentioned names in the Old Testament. We're going to talk about David. And this week I'm going to do the rise of David, and we're going to look at all the things where David did really well. And then next week, Aaron's going to come and he's going to do the fall of David. Because I think in both of those we're going to see a different aspect of ordinariness. Now, David is one of the most recognizable characters in the Bible, not just in the church, but outside the church as well. And his stories are still being told to this day. And it can get really easy to get lost, particularly in the story of Goliath, because we know it so well, and everyone seems to know it so well, that we can get lost in that life, or even his life as the king and everything that he did then. And even we get caught up in the story of Bathsheba, that actually we don't really remember how David began. And so that's where we're going to start today. And so if you would like, I've got some verses on the screen. We're going to be in 1 Samuel 16, and then we'll start going chapter by chapter, or just pick a couple of chapters from there. So 1 chapter 16 is where we're going to start. And it's always helpful to pick up some context. So context, where are we? Israel have come out of Egypt. They've gone into the wilderness, and then they've gone into the promised land, Jericho. They've walked around it, blown the horns. VeggieTales have done their special on Keep Walking, and that was great. Thank you, VeggieTales. After that, we've gone through a series of judges. Israel have been ruled by sort of one person would rise up. Would there be a particular conflict or issue that's affecting a small part of the nation of Israel? Remember, it's 12 tribes. Sometimes the issue affects all 12. Sometimes it's just 3 or 4 tribes. And one person would rise out of that, or God would raise this person up. And put his spirit especially on them, and they would lead for a time, and they would overthrow this conflict or this issue, and there'd be peace in the land for a time, and everyone would return back to Yahweh and say, well, here we are, God, and we're ready to, I'm going to do everything that you want. And then it only takes about 5-10 years, and then often it's the judge, the person who's leading, starts starts slipping away, and then everyone slips away around them, and then we'd go around the cycle again, and God brings more conflict and issues, and then that raises up, and then raises up someone to come and deal with it, and then they slip and fall, and then we go back down. And then what happens in Judges is it's like this spiral. And you start, and it's like, okay, this is kind of okay, but by the time you get to Samson, all Samson does is kill a bunch of people. And it's like, is that really what Israel needed at that time? And Israel finishes, the book of Judges finishes that everyone in that time did what is right in their eyes, did whatever they thought was good, because in that time there was no king. Enter Samuel. He becomes the last judge of Israel, and he gets Israel back on track, and it's wonderful for a time. But then he starts getting old, and his sons are ratbags, and so they start going, we don't actually want your sons to lead us. We want a king. We want to look like everyone else has got a king, and it seems to be working really well for them. We want a king too. And Samuel's like, guys, that's a terrible idea. And then God's like, guys, that's a terrible idea. And they're like, yeah, but we really, really want one. And so the first king they get is a king that they would want. His name is Saul. And Saul is like this man's man. Like he's like the guy, and he's a head taller than everyone else, and he's really good looking, and he seems like at the start it's like, oh wow, we've hit a winner here. But it doesn't take long before Saul starts realizing that he cares more about what the people around him thinks than what God thinks. And so he starts pleasing all the people around him and not pleasing God, and that's going to be a real disaster if you're the king of the land. And so, eventually, God, through Samuel, rejects Saul as king. And enter then 1 Samuel 16, and we'll start, hopefully, at verse 1. Oscar will press 1. You've hopefully got it. Otherwise, you can listen to me. The Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I've rejected him as king of Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I've chosen one of his sons to be king. But Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul heals, he'll kill me. So the Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I've come to sacrifice the Lord. But make sure you invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I'll show you what you need to do next. You are to anoint the one I need. Verse 4, Samuel did what the Lord said, and when he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him. That work? Still not working. You're going to have to press the button. Oh, sorry. And they said, do you come in peace? And Sam said, yes, I come in peace. I've come to sacrifice the Lord. Consecrate yourself and come to the sacrifice with me. And then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice too. And when they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, whoa, surely the Lord's anointed stands before me. Or stands before the Lord. The Lord said to Samuel, don't consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And so Jesse calls it Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel. But the Lord has not chosen this one either. And Jesse then had Shammah pass by, but Samuel said, nor has the Lord chosen this one. And Jesse had all 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. But Samuel said to him, the Lord has not chosen these. Oh, sorry, I'm missing a verse. So he asked Jesse, are these all the sons you have? And he said, they're still the youngest, and he's tending the sheep. Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives. And so Jesse sent for him and had him brought in, and he was glowing with health and had fine appearance and handsome features. And the Lord said, rise and anoint him, for this is the one. You must have read it. It's a famous story, right? And it just fits so well with our series. Samuel is sent by God to an out-of-the-way town. That's where it starts. Now, I know many of you will consider Maitland to be a thriving metropolis. Me too. I mean, that we're like the heart and soul of New South Wales in many ways. But would you believe it? Some people in this place called Sydney might see Maitland as this sort of, I don't know. They don't realize that we're the fastest growing town or city in New South Wales at the moment, which is apparently that's true. Is that true? Everyone keeps telling me it's true, but I don't know what data but we're on the way up. And so we couldn't possibly use that as an example. So I'll let you fill in the town that you would place for this story. For me, the place is called Burra. Burra is a little place out in New South Wales. It's where if you travel to Canberra, you might pass through a place called Queanbeyan. Queanbeyan is the last New South Wales, is the last threshold before you get to Canberra. And it's this out of the way town. There's a population of about, I think it's about 50,000 people in Queanbeyan. It's a bit of a country town, and you can stay there, and it's quite a nice place to be. But if you look at that and go, you know what, this is still a bit too towny for me. I think I want less civilization than that. You can leave Queanbeyan and you can go out towards Googong. Googong is a new plant that they've just put in, maybe about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. It's now got about 10,000 people living in Googong. There's a dam there. Everything is built and it's new and it's lovely and it's got a school. It's a really nice place to be. And you could go to Googong and you'd be like, wow, this is kind of nice. I kind of like it here. But if you got to Googong and you thought, you know what, still too much civilization for me, you could go out Googong, hang a left, and then you end up in a place called Burra. Burra has 800 people in it. Burra has a community hall and a light post. And that's it. And they are 12 kilometers apart. Like, there is nothing in Burra. You can go and have a look at the community hall. Please don't believe the Google reviews. It's got there that it's got nice facilities. The nice facilities is a bench. Like, there is nothing in Burra. When I lived there with my family, we formed almost 1% of the population of Burra. That's how small the town is. There is no shops, there are no roundabouts, there are no traffic lights. When we read the stories about Bethlehem, you should think about Burra. That's what it's like. Samuel heads out of the cities and goes past to the point beyond civilization. And he ends up in this place called Bethlehem. And then in Bethlehem, he calls a whole bunch of people together and says, hey, we're going to have a meeting. And you notice he calls the elders together. And then he has to call Jesse to the meeting as well, because Jesse is not one of the elders of the town. What he's saying is Jesse is not even a good part of the town. Like, he's not one of the good families. If you went to Burra, at least you go and find the best family in Burra and be like, well, maybe there's someone there. If I'm looking for a king and I'm going to this out of the place, I'm going to find the best town I can. I'm going to take the best son I can get. And you get there, and God says the person you're looking for isn't in the elders. You're going to have to invite him. And so then you go and invite him, and he brings 7 sons with him. And then he starts parading the 7 in front of you. And you look at the first one, and you're like, oh my goodness, God, you were right. Look at him. He absolutely could be king. And then God says, the people have chosen a king before based on what they thought would be good. And you saw how that played out. This time, I'm picking the king. And this one is not the one you're looking for. God only has eyes for the heart. So Jesse brings forward 7 of his best options from a no-name family in a no-name town. And none of these 7 options are the right one. We have to go and invite someone else to this meeting. An 8th choice, a forgotten choice from an insignificant family in a town that you probably didn't know existed until I passed it here. And if we just hold for a second and just put ourselves in David's shoes, as you're growing up as David, what do you think God is going to call you to in your life? You are the 8th child in a forgotten family in a forgotten town. What do you think God is calling you to? Yeah, I think you're right. You're just going to shepherd. You are just going to do what your family has done forever. You cannot get more ordinary than David. Which I think leads to some really important questions that we need to ask ourselves, particularly those who are a bit further down the line, as we look at the young people who are here and in our youth group and in our kids' church and in our creche. We need to ask ourselves the question, if God could use David in that way, and David was the lowest of the low in every single way, and he used him in the most incredible way, who have we got here? And what does it look like for me to invest into them? Because we could have, and we do have, another David in our congregation. Someone who God is preparing even now to do something incredible. And it might be something that we know and hear about. It might be something that we never, ever see. But what does God have for the future of our church and the youth and young people that we have here? And what does it look like for us to support them in that? I think they are really important questions that we don't think about enough. David couldn't be more ordinary at the start of this journey, and God is going to do something extraordinary. And so I just want to pick on 2 or 3 stories if we can. It's the rise of David, so we've got to do Goliath because it's Goliath. But I want to do one that maybe you haven't thought of as well. So let's turn to 1 Samuel 17, and we'll start there, and then we'll find out where we go from there. Okay, 1 Samuel 17. Israel's got themselves in trouble again. Turns out when there's a 9-foot tall guy and he's there mocking you and being like, hey, but why won't one of you fight them? Why won't you come and fight me? Yeah, I kind of get why you wouldn't come and fight him. He's 9 foot tall. People don't want to fight him very much. And you would know that David is not supposed to be on the battlefield. If you've read this story before, David turns up to the battlefield because he's going to give some food to his brothers who were there to do the actual fighting. David is still in the place where everyone's like, oh, yeah, Dave, thanks for your help, mate. Why don't you go and get a sandwich for me, and I'll do the fighting for me. That's your part of this story. Thank you very much. That's where we start. And he turns up, and he hears Goliath's call, and he is like, the stunning thing is that he is stunned that no one else will fight him. And it's wrapped up in this short conversation that he has with Saul. Saul, that's the last one. There you go. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against this Philistine, that's Goliath, and fight him. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior from his youth. Implication, David, you have not been a warrior from your youth. You are not strong enough to do this. But David said, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. And if a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, and I struck it, and I rescued the sheep from its mouth. And when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine, great slack. Like if you want to throw shade on someone, try one of those. He will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. I wonder what you notice out of this story. For me, what stands out is the root of David's trust. The root of his trust is anchored in the actions of God in the past. And it's a fascinating, we get to see this wonderful human divine partnership again. You would remember from Genesis 1, God is looking for someone who's going to look like him on the earth and going to act like him. And so sometimes God's going to do it, sometimes man's going to do it, but you're supposed to not really be able to tell, was that God or was that us? That's the heart of it. And this is what we start seeing here, because it's David who grabs the bear by its hair. It's David that's going to strike and kill it. It's David who has killed the lion and the bear, but as he reflects on it, it's the Lord who has rescued me from the paw of the lion and the bear. Who killed the bear? And David says, we killed it. It's really, really cool. Last week, we saw the obedience of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel. And that was the heart of the story, is how obedient to God's voice they were. Here, In David's story, we just see the trust of David. And he heads into this battle against insurmountable odds. And yet he is full of faith and confidence that his God will rescue him, because God has done it before for me when I was in Barah. And so he will do it for me again. And famously, God does rescue him, doesn't he, from Goliath? And David immediately becomes like this cult hero of Israel. Everyone is talking about this kid David. And did you hear? 9 foot tall. He just got a stone. Oh, did you hear about David? And David died. Which is a great thing for David and a terrible thing for Saul. Because Saul is the king at the moment. He's supposed to be the guy that went to fight. He's supposed to be there saying, who could stand against the armies of the living God? But Saul can't do it. And David, his name is on the rise. And the rumor of David, there would be a rumor by now that Samuel has gone and anointed a new king. It was common knowledge that Saul has been rejected. And so who is the new king? And hold on a second, what, some guy just went and beat a 9-foot monster? Do we need to look any further? David clearly has the hearts of his people in the favor of his God. And so Saul is left with a choice that harks all the way back to Abraham. If you remember Genesis 12, God blesses Abraham and says, anyone who blesses you, I will bless. But anyone who curses you, I will curse. And we see this play out really wonderfully in the Joseph story, because Joseph, if you remember, by the end of it, he is the Pharaoh starts working out that God just seems to be with this person. He's able to tell me these dreams and the explanation of it. What I need to do is harness this power. And he elevates Joseph to the second in the kingdom, gives him whatever he wants, space for his family to come and grow and the nation of Israel to grow, because he's realized God is with these people. And if God is with them, he seems to be blessing me as part of it. And so I'm going to get on board with the blessing. And then, turn the page. Exodus starts, and we get a new Pharaoh, and he does not know Joseph, and he does not know the acts that happen with that. And so he sees his people, and they are multiplying like crazy, and instead of seeing blessing with them, he sees them as a threat. And so he begins to curse the Israelite people. And the result of that is the crumbling of his empire, as God does battle with him and pulls his people out of slavery. This same question stands before Saul now. Will you see God with David and get on board and receive the blessing? Or will you stand against David? David is holding on to this promise. One day he will be king. One day he will be king. How then is God going to orchestrate that? Must be a question that he must think about, right? If God said, hey, you're going to be king, queen, you're going to be prime minister, you're going to be whatever, and you know it, there must be a question in you where you go, okay, well, how's this going to play out? Abraham, he had this chance as well, if you remember. God said, you're going to have a baby, and they try for a bit. They try for a bit more, and then they go, it's not working. I know what we'll do, God. Don't worry about it. We'll sort it out. And he has a baby, and it's a disaster. It's a disaster for him, for the future generations of Israel. Everything falls apart because of that decision. David, are you going to trust the promises of God? Or are you going to go, you know what, God? Don't worry. I think I've got this. 1 Samuel 24. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told David is in the desert of En-gedi. So Saul took 3,000 able young men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. Do you know where that is? Me neither. He came to the sheep pens along the way, and a cave was there. And Saul went in, awesome, to relieve himself. I don't think that's the original Hebrew. David and his men were far back in the cave. And the men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish." Here is the king of Israel chasing after David to kill him, and he has walked into the cave where David is hiding, and he is completely at David's mercy. Dave, what are you going to do? How do you want to be king? His men, surely this is what God wants for you to do. This must be God's will. He wouldn't have given you this opportunity if it wasn't God's will, right? So David creeps up unnoticed and he cuts off a corner of Saul's robe. Afterward, he was conscience-stricken for having cut off the corner of his robe, and he said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, who is the Lord's anointed, that I may lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." And with these words, David sharply rebuked his men, and he did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went on his way. Verse 10. David comes out of the cave to confront him, and he says to Saul, "This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave, and some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. And I said, I will not lay my hands on the Lord. I will not lay my hand on my Lord, because he is the Lord's anointed." David had the chance to take power in his own strength. He could have taken God's promise in his own way, and he would have become king in that moment. But David realizes that there must be a better way. He has learned to trust God's plan. He has learned to trust God's plans over his plans. He's learned to trust God's plans over his plans, and to trust in God's timing and not in his time. And so he chooses to wait. And I think that should put some of our prayers into perspective. Because how many times have I felt the answer should be yes, and then found out that I need to wait and sat frustrated by it? Here is a man who is known for being after God's own heart. And when an opportunity rises before him, he chooses to wait. I think David has a reason for this. I think David knows what he's doing. David had spent a lot of time in the fields. And when he reflected on that battle with Goliath, and him being able to stand in front of Saul and say, God has rescued me from the paw of the lion and the bear. If God had made him king in that moment, if God had done something a different way, if David hadn't done the ordinary thing of sitting in the fields day after day, month after month, year after year, he would have never been rescued from the paw of the lion or the paw of the bear. God is doing something in the ordinary. He is doing something in the ordinary. And it was to prepare David for the extraordinary. And so David has this opportunity now. I can no longer live an ordinary life. And his life is pretty ordinary at the moment. He's now on the run from Saul, fearing from his life, with a group of faithful friends just trying to make do on the road. This is not like glitz and glamour. This is lives on the line. And there's an opportunity now for him to go, I don't want to live this way anymore. I actually want to go to the palace. I want the nice food. I want the nice robe. I want to be able to sit down. And David takes that moment and chooses the ordinary because he is convinced that God is going to mold and train and grow and equip him in the ordinary. And as he does that, he will lead him into the extraordinary. We live, and we know this, in a microwavable world. Yeah? If I don't have it, I can get it, and Amazon can deliver it tomorrow. Time waiting in the wilderness, in the desert place, we need to remember is where God grows us and trains us and leads us. It was the same for Moses. It was the same for Joshua. It was the same for Noah, who was an old man before any drop of rain came on the earth. It was the same for Abraham, who was 80 years before he saw what was his fulfillment of God's promise. Our God is a God of waiting, and he calls us to trust his calling on our life and his timing on our life. And in doing so, we give up what I think is another one of our subtle 21st century idols. Along with security, the thing that we want most is control. I want to be able to control what happens next. I want to know what's going to happen next. I want to know where I'm going for holiday later this year. I've got a plan for the next 5 years of reno. I don't. But Cam, he's got a plan for his reno in his house for the next 5 years. And that's not Cam's not wrong for doing that. Maybe because you could do it on my house instead. But we're not wrong for having these plans, but we just have things so laid out, don't we? We just know, I know where my kids are going to go to school, and then I've got this plan for what's going to happen for high school, and I've got it all laid. I've got my life laid out before me, and I'm just moving. This is how it's all going to, and this is going to be so smooth from here. This is what we're going to do. I want that control. And it's right to plan, and it's right to prepare, and it's right to bring that before the God every day. And say, God, would you wreck this if it's not what you want? Keep me in the land of the ordinary if that's what you want. If this is your promise for me, God, let it be your plan too. And that might mean we wait a month or a year. It might mean I have to wait decades until I see what God laid out in front of me. So be it. Dave shared beautifully at men's breakfast his favorite verse. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, and they are good plans. And so if they are good plans, don't I want to follow his plan and not mine? This really is the rise of David. And his star continues to rise until he takes on the kingdom. And even the first sort of 4 or 5 chapters of Samuel, he's just this meteoric rise. And yet in this, it's incredibly ordinary. And again, though God starts in the ordinary, he does extraordinary. Which I think, for me, leads me to worship. I want to trust you, God, more. I want to lay down what I've got. And that, again, is what this table is all about. Looking at his son who came and laid down for us, who laid down his plans and the way that he wanted to do it. And said, not your will, but mine. This today, for you and for me, is another opportunity. Not my will, but yours. God, I bring you my plans for my family, for my house, for my retirement, for my career, for my Lay it down. What would you have me do today, tomorrow? And then, God, would you give us faith, trust that you have been there for us in the past, and you will be there again for me tomorrow. Amen? How good. I'll break bread, and when you're ready, come and share with us.